riots, when they
Oh,
had the riots. And so they then moved to the West Side, and it was there during the time that she lived there that she became a pastor and worked on up in the church. My grandfather was a community, I don't even know what to call him, activist, liaison, whatever. He was a gentleman that linked people who had critical need of
mm,
resources to resources.
mm,
So when we were on the West Side, I know that, he through his, he was a Mason,
mhm.
and then also through just all of the kind of community organizing he did with congressmen. When I used to see people coming in and out of the house, very influential people, and just making sure that different services were delivered to different communities, holding people accountable politically for things that they promised. And he continued to do that when they left Cleveland and moved to San Diego. My grandmother was very instrumental in opening, in starting AARP, and also building, she and another group of women, the free clinic that we have in Cleveland. So they were very much community activists, very much engaged in community for as long as I knew them.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and so, yeah, so I
they
just wanted
inspired
to lift
grand
him up. Yeah.
kindness. You really did. You
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. So when did your family move to Moreland?
When I was 4 years old, so I was like in 1964 when we moved there. It was like a year before I started kindergarten.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
early years were right here in Moreland neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, um,
Um, yeah, Moreland is it's still a part of my life, honestly. Um, and so I'm still in Moreland, and I'm here, in New Orleans, and even when I was in college, was always home to Moreland on Christmas and summer vacations, and so I just feel like I never really left because I've always had this connection to it.
as a
Yeah.
Moreland house, without knowing,
Mm-hmm.
we are right here at your back.
Right.
And tell
Yeah.
us who's in this picture.
So that's my father and my niece and her son and Mr. Thomas, who lives across the street. Mr. Thomas, I think he's just phenomenal. He's always looking in on my dad, and
Oh,
they
good.
work on cars together, like him and the guy next door, Kamal. Well, he's moved, but he used to live next door to his family. And so Eric, he'll come down and check on him. So it's like this real community on Moreland that I really think is I appreciate.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely.
Your early life was
Hmm.
here. Yes, and here's your house
Hmm.
on the
Yeah, that's the house that I grew up in.
beautiful, nice. What's more about you? Okay. And here we have a familiar face. Tell us who's in this
Yeah.
picture.
So here we have with the long dress, that's Eric Brown. And I was telling you, we jokingly call him the mayor of Menlo. Because Eric is just pretty much, I think we have a lot in common in the sense that we believe in being engaged in community and really connecting people and trying to do for folks. And he's standing next to my brother. They were best friends growing up. And
Your
I think
brother,
I'm,
what's your brother?
yeah, my brother's Curtis. And so he lives in Memphis now, but
Okay.
it's the same thing. He comes home as well.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
Brother connection. And we have more
Hmm.
people in the family, and especially you and your father.
Hmm. So yeah, my father is with me now. My father's always been like my biggest cheerleader. Um, he and my mother was very serious about him. And in this picture that's on the screen, we're on a vacation in Tijuana.
Yeah.
And so it's me on the far right side, my cousin Mary, my mother, my father, and my brother Curtis. And so my mother was always focused on education. Um, she was always at every meeting imaginable for parents in Shaker. My father was part of the Shaker Dads Club. They really embraced the community strongly after we moved there. Um, they were very kind of they were very serious about how we represented ourselves and how we would be seen, just, kind of stern about that. Talking to us before leaving out in the community. But yeah, they have owned the house on Menlo now for 60 years. And so they've
Yes,
been in the community for a long time.
yes,
Hmm.
1964. And as I have interviewed, a number of Moreland,
Hmm.
that's the early period
Hmm.
of the 60s is when families, that I've interviewed anyway, first
Hmm.
to the Moreland area. So you all were right here, which means that you knew a lot of your neighbors over time and saw a lot of changes in the neighborhood, including,
Yeah,
I know the ground has been broken for building houses on your
yeah.
street. Yeah.
It's interesting. When we first came, we didn't see any. I think the Gadsons across the street were the second family that came that we knew, who were African American. It was pretty much mostly white on Menlo when we came. That changed over time. But I think like really ethnic, because I was thinking, the women weren't allowed to drive. And I remember we were looking and our parents would drive our mothers, and it was just a little bit of a different culture. Um, People weren't mean or anything. They just kind of slipped away and then they were just gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, who do we have here on the top left?
The top left is my sister Gwen. She loves to cook, and so that's what she's doing there. She she contracted cancer, and so she really struggles with it. But one of the strongest people I know. She just keeps fighting, just keeps going. Yeah.
In the bottom, is this you and your brother?
Yeah. We're standing. That's when we first brought my dad down here. My
And
father is.
and down here is
Oh,
what?
okay. It's in New Orleans. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So I'm here. I'm in New Orleans right now, but sometimes I'm in Cleveland. So it's good to ask me. My father was fortunate to get into a program. It's a neurologic music program, and it's for people who suffer with a range of neurological problems. And it's helped him a lot with his cognitive strength and just overall, um, just kind of slowing down this disease, and just really doesn't get rid of it, but it has really helped a lot. I think he was the second person to be able to receive the treatment, and I guess, well, they're studying him in the process. So it's been 3 years. The first year that he came, we were here for pretty much full time. I talked to my husband, and he was retired at the time. So, so we just agreed, I went on and gave up my job. And so we just agreed to move and see what we could do for him. My father's always been that person that's been there for a lot of people. Just a very responsible person, a good father, just really always showed up. And
Wonderful.
so, yeah, it was no trouble to do that.
And your father's
Yeah.
name?
His name is Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have beautiful pictures of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Also through some of the pictures of you and your
Mm-hmm.
father.
And here on the right, he's shopping on Harvard in the grocery store.
Oh, okay. Over there. Beautiful pictures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's in the backyard with my brother, and that's me and my dad.
Yeah. Talk about how much you look like your father.
Mm-hmm. And so again, more pictures of us.
Mm-hmm. Nice. These are keepsakes.
Yeah, he was like at every event at Shaker. Sometimes I used to wish he wasn't. I'm
Well,
serious. I got in trouble one day and I looked up and my father was in the building. I was like, oh my goodness. Because he always would check in and things. And I told my teacher something that I thought I was being helpful because she had a little bit of an odor, and I was like, people are laughing at you. I got in trouble and I got sent to the office. And when I was going to the office, my father was walking into the building. And I was like, oh no. But he always was the gay. So he came and sat and listened. And it worked out really well because he was able to sit with the teacher and facilitate the conversation, actually. So I was just happy for that because I just thought I was in trouble.
Almost, but we understand that. We
Yeah.
understand. And you said this is when your father's in the music therapy.
Yes, that's part of the process. And he plays all kind of instruments now, and he writes songs, and he has like there are 3 people in the program now, so they have like a little ensemble thing where they perform. But um, embedded in it are various different techniques that I guess they've been trained in as therapists to work with people like my dad. So it's I'm
That
very happy for him.
that's I'm
Yeah.
for all of you. Yes, I'm sure that's really blessed
Hmm.
family. So that's yes, no pictures of father, you and your
Hmm.
that's great. That's great. And as we scroll through these pictures,
Hmm.
Father, I want you to tell us a little bit about your educational background after
Hmm.
Cleveland, because this is will open up this world of your life,
Hmm.
all of the people.
Yeah. Uh, um, I actually started my education on in Huff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was in one of the first Head Start programs in the country. Um, and my father was working at General Motors. I mean, yeah, General Motors. And there was an offer being made to workers at General Motors to come out and look at houses in the Shaker community. And that's how I guess that's what my parents tell me about how they learned about it. And my mother was really wanted to do it because education was something she was really concerned about. And so they came out and started looking at houses, and they bought the house on Menlo. And so that's how we came there. I entered Moreland. I was in Betty Scher's classroom. Um, and then I graduated from Moreland and I went to Woodbury.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Woodbury through 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, Cleveland Heights High School opened the School Without Walls.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And it was supposed to be this really great college prep program, very experimental and, like it's so different. So I ended up going there for high school. And
Mm-hmm.
I stayed there until 12th grade. And then I finished school in San Diego.
San Diego. So your
Mhm.
grandma out in San Diego, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you got your degree in San Diego, right? Your
I
bachelor.
did. I did. There were a couple of advantages to it. One, I think I mentioned earlier when we were talking that there was a gentleman who had attacked me coming home from school, and my parents were really afraid they hadn't caught him. And he turned up outside of school one day, so they made the decision to do that. But I think also because at that time, um, because something that happened to me in San Diego would have made them not want to do it. But at that time, if you lived there for a year and you went to college, you could go to college free. So I
Yeah.
didn't have any tuition for my undergraduate education. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think that factored into it as well.
California's education
Yeah,
system.
it was great.
Wonderful. It's
Hmm.
wonderful. Community college, California's
Hmm.
system. Yes.
Hmm. Hmm. And
Beautiful.
so
Big
in
picture.
these pictures here, I'm in California. On the right are 2 of my cousins who actually grew up in Cleveland and now they live in California. Because I think eventually, once my grandparents went out there, I think we all went, following behind them because we always were a close extended family. And so those are my cousins. And then on the other side are my 2 goddaughters and a young lady that is one of the young ladies that I mentor. And so,
We're going to talk a lot about your mentoring because
yeah,
that's a major part of who you are.
it is. It really is.
Yes. So
Yeah.
you finished your bachelor's degree in San Diego, and then
Hmm.
you went off to Howard.
And well, actually, at first I went to New York and I went
Okay.
to the New School for Social Research.
Mhm.
And it was just too, I think I was looking for something more academic,
Hmm.
more traditionally academic. I'll put it that way.
Mhm.
We had like bums sleeping in the stairwell. Like I wasn't used to.
Okay. All righty.
I was like,
Yeah.
why is this bum in our bathroom coming out the ceiling? Just like it just wasn't something I was used to. So I ended up going to Howard.
Okay.
I left after the first year and I went to Howard and I graduated from Howard. And then I came back to New York and went to Columbia.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us
Mm-hmm.
about. So you got a couple. Did you get a couple of degrees at Howard? Was
I
that?
got a master's in communication arts at Howard. And then I went to Columbia and I did a master's in English education, a master's in ed leadership, and then I ended up doing my doctorate there in educational administration. Yeah.
Yeah. My goodness. Just wonderful. And that I had asked you at one point, and we'll, weave this in,
Mm-hmm.
asked you what the title of your dissertation was. I'm going to read this. I'm going to read it because I wrote it down.
Thank
Okay?
you.
I want you to look for it. Okay. Achieving Success, a qualitative study of the school lives of high
Mm-hmm.
achieving African American girls attending school in a northeastern suburban middle school. So there you go, folks.
Yeah.
Your dissertation. And
It's just so light.
we had talked, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, we can talk about this, on and on and on
Mm-hmm.
about your interest and your focus on high achieving African American girls.
Mm-hmm.
And the book cover, I know that we're going to show, as well, but all of your work is defined
Mm-hmm.
by, who you are in your education and
Mm-hmm.
what you do,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the academy and inside in school and the whole nine yards.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure that everybody heard the title of your dissertation from
Oh,
from
yeah.
Columbia.
Yeah. And I don't know. I remember my cousin was telling me I've always been a big activist for girls, even when I was young, but I don't really have a memory of that, to be honest.
Mm,
But I know that at the time that I was in school, in college, I was working on my dissertation. Um, there was a lot of work on, teen pregnancy and Black girls. And so people were working on that. And I had an interest in understanding high achieving Black girls because I knew a lot of high achieving Black girls my whole life.
mhm,
From the time I was in elementary school, my friends were like,
mm,
people I sat in class with, they were just extraordinary. But I noticed that when I was in college and we were doing research, nothing ever came up about Black girls.
mhm,
And I was in college at the same time that there was a lot of work being done on Black boys.
mhm,
Um, and I've done some work on Black boys, and it was definitely needed, but still nothing on Black girls. So I started looking around. I mean, other than the teen pregnant dropped out of school, it just seemed like they could never get past that. And I'm like, wow, I'm still seeing these girls. And so I was a teacher and I was in the classroom and I was seeing these girls even then. And so I found one study that was done in 1972 and it was like in the 90s.
mm,
And it was the first study I found on actually that gave a profile of a Black girl in a classroom.
mm,
Just this girl, just a regular student, and somebody taking an interest in her.
mhm,
And so it was also at the time where we were talking a lot about equity in education. And I had studied under James Banks, who was really forming his ideas out there about multicultural education. Linda Darling Hammond, who was from Cleveland. Gosh, it's just a whole host of either Black studies folks or Black folks who were in education, in Black education. I think they shaped a lot. I mean, John Henry Clark was a big person who was a mentor to me. He was like a father. Um,
And he was in New York.
he was in New York. I think New York had a lot to do with shaping after I left Cleveland. I think my uncle, my grandparents, the religious community, the Black religious community, liberation theology, I think is just part of who I'm always going to be. I was raised in the church in that way. And so I think it just lives there. Like it's nothing is where it's going to go.
I can
Um, yeah.
think about
Mhm.
what you're saying, and you need to just give a presentation outside of witness to history. We just need
Mhm.
to learn.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So,
I feel a kindred spirit here.
absolutely. So let's
Mhm.
talk about, so you were in New York for a while, and
Mhm.
so you taught there, Bank Street. We have pictures, I think, of you and your students.
Yeah, I taught in New York City public schools for a number of years. I think what was helpful, and the thing about Bank Street is the way in which they teach and the way in which they do instruction. It's a lot of critical thinking, inquiry based, project based, learner centered practice. And I realized at some point later, because I think I was really fortunate, I think I was really privileged to have gone to school in Shaker
Mhm.
and then to when I entered New York City public schools, it was right in the heart of the school reform movement. And so it was a focus, there was a focus on small schools. And a lot of the impetus for that was coming out of Teachers College where I was going to school.
Mhm.
And so I was in these spaces and learning this stuff. And I was working for New York City Partnership. Actually, one of my professors had connected me with New York City Partnership before I came to New York so I could have a job. And they were the corporate big business arm of the Small Business Administration. So you had the small businesses, and then you had these big corporate businesses that were getting involved in education, that were writing a lot of the economic reform reports at that time, and that were pushing for reform in the schools because they didn't feel like they were getting good workers. And so that was driving a lot of what was happening in education policy. And it just seemed like I landed right in the center of that.
Mhm.
And so when I was at the partnership, had an opportunity to kind of influence a lot of um, what was going on, but none of it was going on in Harlem. It was happening all downtown. And so that was a problem for me because I lived in Harlem. I landed in Harlem when I got to New York. So that was home. And Columbia University is in Harlem. And I was at Columbia.
Right.
And as much as they were saying we were in some other neighborhood, we were really in Harlem.
Right.
So they kept saying it was another neighborhood. And I'm looking out the windows. I'm like, it looked like we're in Harlem to me.
Harlem to me.
Um, you know, so I was able to facilitate having resources come uptown. I think that's when I think probably I didn't even think about it until this moment. Probably my community engagement organizing work and education started intersecting at that point.
Okay. So
Um,
could
yeah.
you
Mhm.
tell us specifically about the board and your students? Because you said that
Well, at that time, I was a member of Abyssinian Baptist Church, and I have been a member. I went there because of the pastor, and I was looking for him. He was from Virginia and all
yeah.
that. He retired like the week after I got there. I was like, ah.
Oh,
But and
then
so
there,
Calvin Butts became the
but
pastor, and so
right.
he ended up being my pastor, and I was like really happy about it.
Mhm.
Um, and so Abyssinian was going through reform in terms of housing and how they want to do housing, and just building African American ownership. And Abyssinian built Thurgood Marshall Academy School, and I was the first co-director of the school. And I worked with Dr. Sandy Johnson. She was really the visionary. It was really her baby. Um, And at that time, there were really most of the good schools uptown were gone, had closed. And we were regularly sending the children who had demonstrated any kind of promise out to private schools in Connecticut, and we lobbied in Pennsylvania. And so they were leaving home because we really had no place in the neighborhood to send them. And this was the beginning of the alternative schools hadn't been formed or anything. So we developed Thurgood Marshall Academy. And it's a K through, well, it was grade 6 through 12. We were developing a 6 through 12 school, but now it's K through 12. And we have like different chapters of different branches of the school now. But at that time, we were in the same room, in the same building with Kip. Kip was just getting started. They were down the hall. We were just trying to build something. We didn't know. We kind of felt like we knew what we were doing. But then I went to Thurgood Marshall Academy. To Central Park East Secondary School, and that was the first.
Okay. So where are you?
School.
Where are you in the picture we have?
Hmm?
Where are you in the picture we have of you and your students?
Okay, that's at Bank Street, and so at Bank Street came later.
Okay.
Because I was teaching at that point. Because I had started. After I left the public schools full time, I started teaching. Well, actually, they hired me at CUNY at Medgar Evers. I was an associate professor. Okay. And so I left public schools and I had started working in higher ed at that time. And Bank Street I would do summer programs with Bank Street. And so that was one of the years, because I did summer programs with them for about 4 years. And they purposely focus on developing, young thinkers and young minds, young people to be leaders. And, oddly, we were amongst that first group of colleges who were attacked for CRT back then. Like,
oh boy,
they were forming, I think, now that I look back, they were just kind of forming the strategy for it. Yeah. So I remember us being attacked for some kind of liberal curriculum. They weren't calling it CRT, but it was like kind of like the prototype for what we see now. Yeah. They just felt it was too liberal, and it, we're talking to parents and going to the board, and it was a lot of pressure and things written in the paper and that kind of thing. So it was interesting.
We have so much more to see all these different, because New York was just one place that you were. After that, this is one of your mentees, you said.
Yes. Lisa's like a sister to me now. Like I met her when she was 19 and she's in her 50s. She's just a phenomenal artist, mother, friend, sister. She's a beautiful human being. She's so rare of a spirit, and so I'm just really happy that she's still in my life, that we've been able to keep a relationship
at her in
this time. Yeah.
So then you were in, this is New Orleans, right?
Yes, that's one of my classes at Bard Early College, in New Orleans. And so they were doing presentations, in class and getting prep for them.
I'm going to share with everybody. So you're in Cleveland, Shaker, then San Diego, and then you were at Howard in New York, then Philadelphia, right?
I did spend some time in Philadelphia. Not a long time. It was a summer. In Philadelphia. Oh, here at the conference. Okay. So here, the American Educational Research Association is really huge in my life, I have to say. I try to be there every year for the annual meeting. And this year, the annual meeting was in Philadelphia. And what is going on here? Oh, okay. Someone's trying to call in. I was like, I lost everything. I was like, what's going on? So yeah, the meeting was in Philadelphia, and that's a time where I'm able to come together with people, colleagues that I've known for a long time, see what's going on, be strengthened, find out what's new, and things like that. But it's really a place where it's more than the knowledge. It's the way that people see each other and embrace and treat each other. Because for many of us, I used to head up the teacher ed program at Tulane. And for many of us, your students are so not used to seeing you in or seeing a person of color in certain positions. And so there can be resistance to that. But also, people thinking you came there to do housekeeping or whatever, and you're the professor. So I think there's some grace given because there's so much love and support. And I think just recently, with the professor who committed suicide a few years ago, a couple of years ago, it's been 2 years now, time is really passing, with what happened with the president at Harvard. I think people are really reaching out and asking, are you doing okay? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? More so than than they might have done in the past.
Right.
And so I really appreciate that. It's that kind of, environment.
Now you made a stop in Philadelphia. I was saying, isn't that City Hall back there behind you?
Yeah. That was during that same conference.
Same
And
conference.
yeah. I had an opportunity to present. I did in my book, Difficult Dialogues About 21st Century Girls, that I think you had a picture, whatever. I kind of took on the Obama administration. So at the conference, I presented. Jill Biden and Michelle Obama were amongst the people that we were presenting to. So it's kind of a little bit. But she was fine. Like I didn't know she was gonna take it, but she was really, 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 really graceful and good. But yeah, I wrote about just the lack of just conscious policy on Black girls. And so, Obama had his program for males, and which I think he needed to do, but I thought there were enough women in that administration to kind of look out for girls. And so I kind of wrote to that.
I think because there's so much focus on achievement of African American students, and as though girls don't have to have sport because we tend to do better than the males. We see that, and that
See,
is.
See, I kind of don't see that. And that's been my contention with my colleagues. I think when we get there, we do well.
Yeah.
When we get there, we excel.
We have to do it on our own.
But look at the low percentage who actually get there to do well. So when you're looking at the numbers who are coming out of high school and the college, they're very low. Now, do we have the highest number of degrees of people go to college? Yes, Black women killing it. But that's still a very small percentage of us.
Oh, yes. Oh, goodness, yes. Oh, yes, compared to the entire population.
So we have to, I just feel like, not less for the boys, but more for the girls.
Absolutely. So you are in many different spaces. So we have the Urban League here, and this will bring, yeah, and
I love the Urban League.
And some of the work that you're doing in New Orleans, and we're going to talk a lot, about that activism and all. But you have this other book here, Gumbo for the Soul. So you have a chapter in the book?
Yes, I do. It's called Some People Come Into Your Life for a Season and a Reason. A Reason and a Season.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And it's about the relationship between a friend, actually a friend of mine that I grew up with. So it takes place in Shaker. Some of it takes place in Shaker at Shaker Square and other places around the city. Mm-hmm. And it's really about two young girls who grow up together and grow apart, in life, and how painful it was, and how that's, life is sometimes like that. Mm-hmm. And so these stories are from women, African-American, Latino women who have done well, and what it kind of speaks to the cost, of moving on sometimes, and, what achievement, what it costs sometimes, and what it takes to get there, and why you celebrate it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Great. So tell us too about your work with the Urban League.
Mm-hmm. So the Urban League, I've been associated with for just a long time, from teenager, undergrad, just kind of growing up through the Urban League. And it's a consistent network of people who just are a bunch of do-gooders. They really are. Like, you have some chapters that are stronger than others.
Yes.
But generally, when we get together in the annual meeting, you have people who are there who just have spent their lives just kind of working in communities and trying to make people's life better, trying to help people create generational wealth and well-being and economic well-being and education and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the way the organization is structured is you can literally grow up in the Urban League and move through to different places. So I guess I'm at the Guild. I'm at the older end of the spectrum, but they have been greatly supportive, and I love the young professionals. We have many of them that I've worked with in New Orleans and Cleveland, just all around. And it just kind of gives support to our young professionals as they make that transition from high school to college. You have support from college to being a professional. You have support as you grow up in your profession. You have support. You have a network, because, like I was saying before about AERA, I think it's the same with almost every organization I've been in like that, including the National Organization for Women. I felt like I had been in a desert in some regards before I went there. It was amazing the way, it just the beauty and the gift of just kind of somebody really understanding kind of my walk. Right. And so
you need that
support. Those organizations usually are trying to just help people stand up and help them, to develop.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now you're doing more work in New Orleans. You were telling us about your
but I am working on the Urban League conference in Cleveland. It's going to be in Cleveland this July, and so I am working on some things with them.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And you were telling me about your foundation support, or the organization you're working.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all, and I'm still trying to figure out how you do all this, but yes, tell us just what it is.
Okay. So I don't know. Sometimes I drop the ball. I think that, so this has to do with my growing interest in philanthropy. Started out, I was trying to figure out how to write grants for my nonprofit. And so I moved from there to kind of really entering the philanthropic community. I took this class in emerging leadership, found out, and I didn't know this, maybe you already knew, but I didn't know that African Americans were the largest group of philanthropists in this country. Mm-hmm. They get more money than any other group, even though they don't have money.
Right.
And so I thought that was so interesting. And just and actually I did work with the Greater Cleveland Foundation as well. And they actually gave me a grant when I was doing some work, community work there as well. But so the Greater New Orleans Foundation has a number of classes and workshops, and they're very community focused. Mm-hmm. And so their focus is really very much centered around lifting up nonprofits on one end and really targeting them. And when I say lift up, even from classes for directors, classes for board members, how to be a board, classes for different small philanthropists and just different, small business, small entrepreneurs, if you want to partner with another, they just have a range of just trainings and organizations. So within there, I joined and became part of a giving circle. And as part of that giving circle, we put in so much money and then we raised so much money. And then the foundation matches that money. And then we give it to mostly our giving circles focus on grassroots organization. For this particular, because I'm in a couple of giving circles. So for this one, it's grassroots organizations. And here we're out on a site visit at a place called First Grace. And they have housing for transitional families who are unhoused. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up giving them, it's only a $30,000 grant, but for a startup, it's hard for grassroots people. They haven't been around enough to establish themselves so they can get big money, but they're still out here doing work. So that's why we decided to focus on those organizations. My group was focused on unhoused organizations that serve unhoused people, but there was also a group focused on education. There was a group focused on health, and another group that was focused on arts and culture. Okay. Organizations. And then I'm in another group called Impact 100. It's 100 women who've come together. We each put in $1,000 and then we raise money. And then our money goes to kind of like more mid-range agencies they've gotten themselves established. They're doing okay. They're serving people, but there are services they need to grow. There's more services they want to give. And so they apply, we put out requests for proposals and they apply and then we fund them.
Your foundation. When I called you the other day and you said voter registration. So can we go?
Yeah, that's why I'm
right. So I'm picturing you. Can we go to registration in New Orleans?
Yes.
Tell me about tell me what else you're doing in New Orleans. All righty.
Okay, so I've always been involved in activism. So that's the community engagement thing. Like I said, I'd like to leave something somewhere. So when I was in New York, it was stop and frisk marches with my husband. My husband is like my partner in crime. So he doesn't like to take pictures of me. That's why you don't see a lot of them, but he's everywhere I am. So it was stop and frisk because they kept stopping and frisking us walking across 125th Street in Harlem. So we were like, this is ridiculous. I got frisked 3 times just walking down the street. So we joined that movement. So we busted the stop and frisk with mayor. And then I ended up supporting the mayor later. And then it was Occupy New York. I mean, so the kids were down there in Lower Manhattan and they had their tented communities. So then we were going down there taking food and just like doing community education things and just, I don't know what we call ourselves to. So my husband is the kind of person that when we lived in Harlem, our house was always open to people. And so that's how my grandparents were. Actually, their house was never closed to anyone. You can knock on their door at any time. And my husband's got that. I don't know where he got it from, but he's that kind of person. Probably got it from his mom. And so people would come to our house at night for food, for money, because they were depressed or whatever was going on, fights in the family. And so we just have long time, this is who we've been. So now I'm in New Orleans, not doing stop and frisk. I started with Black Lives Matter in New York. So that was like kind of the last movement stuff that I did in New York, and then came to New Orleans, and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know anybody here. And at that time, I was just mostly going to the hospital because that's where my dad was, just making sure that he had. Then I was like, I got to find a life because, you know, he's in the hospital. I can't do anything with him. I don't know anyone. When I leave the hospital, I didn't know anyone. So I actually volunteered for the Urban League here. And it was the year that Obama was coming, and they put me on the White House detail duty. So we're going around with Obama and Mark Morial and their family and all this kind of stuff. And so I was just becoming more interested in New Orleans. And then someone on at the Urban League just kind of said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I gave up everything. I don't know anybody here. You know, so I'm just, so she invited me to some things and just started getting me more and more involved. Yeah. And then I got to the People's Institute, which I guess I'll talk about a little bit later. And so they kind of, being with the People's Institute kind of really got me more engaged with the community, got me to getting a job so I could work and have something to do while I was here. Step Up, I knew about them then, but I wasn't involved. But I did get involved in Take 'em Down NOLA, which became the national Take 'em Down statue movement around the country. And so we were really trying to really shape it and make sure it was powerful. And it was like, grew bigger than anything we ever thought it would grow into. And, you know, and then I was working because of the school system here. Everything was pretty much taken from these people in terms of their local public schools. And they had, so they want their community schools back, which I can understand. I think sometimes in Shaker, we get mad about that too. You know, with Moreland being gone, like, we want our community schools. I kind of felt what they were talking about. And so then I got started getting involved with that and working with people on schools and school movements. And all of these groups here work together. So Step Up works on schools. And so I'm just on the voting side of it now, but I was engaged with, you know, kind of community education around what do you look for in a board member that's running for school board, and you know, just kind of things like that. And so it all started with education. And then when they started the vote, Get Out the Vote campaign, the reason why we're doing it, we think everybody should vote. That's true. But in the state of Louisiana right now, we have on the ballot, after 10 years of Step Up trying to get it on the ballot, the Workers' Bill of Rights. And so 47% of Black folk in New Orleans don't have health benefit. They get minimum wage. They don't have sick pay. They don't have leave. And so that's why we're in these, all of these communities all over the state, because we want this to pass. This is a serious economic issue. And it's a serious intergenerational economic issue. And that's why people are poor. Like they don't make much money, and generation after generation, you're minimum wage, no benefits. It's just terrible. So that's really what the big push is behind there. And so once we get this passed, then we'll be working on education again.
I want to read this comment from she put in the chat. Have you noticed differences in how education is done in various places you've lived? Is there a place or practice you wish were implemented nationally? And then she says, I agree with Donna W about doing a presentation about girls around girls. Yes, I think that's just we're gonna talk about that after Witness to History. Right. You need to just have your time. We could do that.
I don't know. Just as a quick answer, education reform has been hard. I worked on education reform in New York, in Westchester, Nyack counties. Like I've been working in reform for a long time. New Rochelle School District was the only school district that we worked with that actually closed the achievement gap. They already had a cadre of high achieving young girls. But what they did do, because I did my dissertation there, is they took my dissertation and they turned it into a training manual for staff for the school district that they still use. And so I think some districts are more amenable to it. I think what I liked about New Rochelle is that in some regards, they were like Shaker. They were willing to sit down. The leadership was willing to sit down and say, we got a lot of problems and this is not going to be easy, but let's try. And so, yeah. So I don't know. I think, I don't know, because everything is different. I was amazed at California teachers because they had such big classrooms and they had year round and they were amazingly effective. And I often thought about it because when I was in New York, I was in small schools the whole time I was there. I never did a traditional school there and I never wanted to. So that was kind of part of my choice. But I was always in small schools. So I always had a classroom of maybe 12 to 16 students. And you can do a lot with that if you have the support. And so when I went into Central Park East Secondary School, we were one of the first staff-run schools. So we had to deal with our own budgets. We had to deal with our own curriculum. At that time, they were saying children in the inner city could learn, and we were saying, yes, they can. And so all of the stuff that you see around the having the, what do you call them? Like really the whole small school thing design that you saw really came out of the work that we did. Advisories, for example, when school started, we started that. When school started establishing advisories and just kind of different kind of reforms. We spent a lot of time making mistakes and trying to get it right with the children. And I was excited to get out of school because I wanted to really go in the field and see how do the things that I'm learning, how do they really work? You know,
outcomes.
Yeah, and I just think that just to tie it back to Shaker, it really all goes back to Moreland for me. When what you saw in those pictures with those children, the way that that project was laid out, that's the way I learned how to do projects from very young. Like I don't even know how to, and it gets me in trouble, man. Like I really wish I did because I've kind of been an oddball, and maybe that's why I've been in these different spaces because there's a lot of spaces where I just didn't fit. You know, yeah.
And my goodness, every place you touch, can definitely benefit from the experiences that you. I don't mean to, I want to get the group in New Orleans, John, because it's a cultural focus. I think so. I wanted you to share. Yes. So you told me about.
Yeah. So this isn't really a group, but some of the members in in the other pictures are from PSAP, from the group that I belong to. In this group, actually, are some Buddhists. And my husband's in that group with the yellow and the red thing in his here. And so we're there for something for the Mayafa celebration that happens in New Orleans every year, July 2nd weekend, which is the same weekend of Essence Fest. And so what happens is there's a dedication given to and a memorial to African people who came here via the triangular slave trade. And so interestingly, it's one of the things that I really love about New Orleans. In the pictures that you have here are trainers who are with me at the People's Institute, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But what I love about New Orleans is this is a multicultural event. And so you have Jewish people coming out, you have people from the Indian community, Muslims, and they are feeling it, like they're coming out to really give honor, French, people with French heritage and so forth and so on. And so it starts like at 6 o'clock in the morning. And there are different people who come up and they speak and they give testimony. There's songs, there's singing, and different things like that. And then there's this walk through the Treme neighborhood, which is one of the oldest African American neighborhoods here. That church that we're standing in front of, the African Methodist Church, is one of the first African American churches in the country, actually. Um, and so in the picture with me, uh, I'm on the, well, for me, I'm on the right from the way I'm looking at it. And next to me is Dr. Wilson. She's a very noted, actually, international historian. She did a piece that morning. She's from the West Indies, and so she came in and did a piece. The young man next to her is, he's actually gone into theology school, but he is one of her former students, and he's also a trainer at the People's Institute with me. Carolyn Bibieri is a provost at Tulane, and she started the Ashe Center here. And then on the end is probably one of my closest friends, Maureen Joseph. She's a social worker and she trains all over the country. In fact, she's working with Cuyahoga County right now with their early childhood staff, and she does stuff around racial trauma and different things like that. So it's really interesting.
I want to read this Quintella Draper. She says, I'm sorry, this is so interesting. I was definitely watch the recording to see what I missed. Thank you for devoting so much time to others.
Oh, thank you.
And John, if you would go back to the slide, the People's Institute, I want you to explain that a little bit.
And I thought I had put, and I might not have because I couldn't remember if I had, but the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond is known as PSAP. It's a very, actually it's very popular, but it is an anti-race, undoing racism training institute. And it was started by Dr. Jim Dunn, who was at not Oberlin, Antioch. He was at Antioch, and Ron Chisholm, who was from New Orleans. It's the oldest, one of the oldest anti-racist training institutes in the country. It's the only African-American headed one. We've trained more than 500,000 people around the world. We trained most of the Black Lives Matter people you saw out there. And so it's a multicultural network. It's something that's very important to me, because I learned about multicultural education in school and about diversity, but until you study race, it's a whole different thing. You know, when you really study race and you begin to look at systems in the country and, you know, just things that you hadn't really been pushed in school before. But we go wherever we're invited. I've trained at, oh gosh, so many places. I've trained at Princeton. I've trained at military academies, law firms, hospitals, Harvard. I think where I get sent the most is to the New England area. For some reason, I got a lot of requests for me to come to New England. I still figured it out. But Brazil, and since our trainers live all over the world, you kind of arrive in a space and you don't necessarily know who you're going to be training with in advance. But it's such a just such a tight knit family. You can kind of depend on us wherever we are. We are there for each other, because, you know, even for the whites who are in this movement, who do this work, you know, you might not have people around you who understand it, what you're doing. And so it's something that you have to have a lot of humility about, and a lot of empathy and a lot of patience. Um, and so, we lean on each other because of that. And so this group of women here, and this young man, I'm working at Step Up with the guy on the left right now. Like, they show up for me, and I've done it. We came in together, so I guess that's why we're together, because we're in the same cohort. So the older members kind of hazed us, so we came in together. So we still see, yeah, y'all young people, y'all don't know what it is, So they really hazed us when we came in. We had to really prove ourselves.
Right. Those who couldn't hang, they're gone. All right.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. That's the way it works. Well, I want to just go. I think our conversation is coming to an end. We could talk.
Okay.
No, we could. You have some other slides, I think, because you're part of the Buddhist community. Do we have those slides? Yes.
Yay. Yes. I actually became part of the Buddhist community in New York initially, and then I came to New Orleans, and I was kind of curious about it, and I was meaning to connect with the Buddhist community in New Orleans, but I hadn't done it yet. And there was a lady next door to me, and they were Buddhists. And every time I went past their house, I was like, what are they doing? Why are all these people there? And I was like, it looks like they're chanting, like they might be Buddhists. So I knocked on their door one day, and they actually were Buddhists. They invited me in, and they've become like family too. But this picture actually happens to be in White Plains in New York.
Okay.
And we were having a meeting, one of our Buddhist meetings there. So it's really funny because a lot of Buddhists are Buddhists, and I am Christian and Buddhist. And so that's just kind of like really interesting to people.
Yes. Well, back to, the point you're making about how you went to New Orleans and didn't know anybody and didn't know what you were going to do.
Right.
Imagine that lasted very long, because you are someone who's going to, put your time and effort into helping, certainly in so many different ways. So I'm sure that didn't last very long that you did. And it's just vast in terms of, how much it is that your knowledge is just astounding. Does anybody have comments, questions? Good folks here.
I don't know why my skin looks weird to me.
Oh, Kevin. Okay, let me see. Am I doing this? Let me see. Where's the chat? Okay. Kevin K has a question. When you were at Central Park East, what kinds of attempted interference from district administration did you have to fend off?
None. Absolutely none.
Okay.
None. I think that the political work was already done for us by the initial school founders, but none.
That's wonderful.
We were supported by the Coalition for Essential Schools. We just had a lot of progressive supporters. And we really didn't have any problem. Once they got the structure and they got it approved to be able to do the staff run school, like they had already done the work. I'm sure they went through a lot because I've been now worked with new school startups and new organizational startups. So I know it's a challenge. But by the time I got there, they cleared a lot of those hurdles.
That's wonderful. So doing the work. That's wonderful. Any other questions, comments? My goodness, Donna. Do we have any other slides that we didn't get to? Well, I have to just let you all know that we had many, many, many more pictures. Just one. And I hope that this, collecting your pictures too is, help tell your story. It's in somewhat of order, around your life, So I mean, there can be a book on Donna Johnson, folks, And this is just one chapter because I know still a lot more work that you have to do. Wherever you have to be. So this is Moreland, and it's really it's not something that we just take for granted that folks who are our neighbors, or even just what you talked about, what you learned from being in Moreland Elementary School, what that did to shape your outlook on life. And this is a familiar person to many of us.
Yeah. Because they told us that in Moreland we could do anything, and we, we
Right,
believed them.
you believed it. Right, you believed it. All
We
right, that's
believed
what
them.
you do. Yes, yes. Many of us may recognize this person. Sure
Hey,
will.
Joy.
Mhm.
So, Joy wrote a book on. We have this ongoing conversation because she wrote a book on Medgar Evers recently. That's her latest book, and his relationship with the NAACP, which was horrible.
Mm.
They didn't support him. Um, it is her belief that had they supported him, he'd still be alive, but they didn't. And I saw a lot of parallels between Du Bois's relationship with the NAACP and Medgar's relationship with the NAACP, because Du Bois was always in conflict with the NAACP as well. And so we've been, having this ongoing conversation about it. So when she came to New Orleans, I definitely wanted to go and support and get the book. Yeah.
Yes, I'm one of her biggest fans. I think she's
And I
great.
mean, when I say a beautiful person, just really a beautiful human being, just she's going to be here with Ta-Nehisi Coates on November 15th.
Oh, really?
And it's just going to be lit because it's just going to be wonderful because she brings this certain spirit. Like, there are people who really dislike Joy on television. And I'm saying you have to really be in the room with her. She's a beautiful person. She really is.
And
Just
I know
very kind and yeah.
he has a new book out too.
And yes, he does. Yeah. And so that's what he's going to be talking about. He's getting a lot of, I guess, a lot of pushback,
Well,
bad energy. Yeah.
quite a voice. That's quite
Yeah. Yes.
pushback. People need to read his book and understand,
Right.
what. So, any questions, any comments? This was absolutely wonderful.
Hey, Donna, or Donna's,
Hey,
um,
Oh,
Carmela.
yes, right.
hey, Donna, Donna, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really, I really enjoyed listening to you.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and it's funny you mentioned, I wish I could be there to
Mm-hmm.
listen to Joy and Ta-Nehisi
Yeah.
discuss his new book. I just
Mm-hmm.
got his book. I haven't started reading it yet,
Yeah, I
but
did too.
I've seen some of the interviews, and it's been very interesting.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Been very interesting.
Um,
Um,
Here it. I saw the interview with actually Charlemagne did the interview with Kamala here, and I
Hmm.
just was a
mhm.
bug on the wall, just trying to, because I didn't know how. I was like, what is Charlemagne gonna say? So,
Yes.
but it was interesting.
Yeah, but thank you. I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate the work
Mm-hmm.
that you do.
Oh, thank you.
And
Mm-hmm.
I know that all of the places you
Mm-hmm.
have been touched, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure they have felt your presence.
Hope so.
And yeah, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So you know what? I've got a question for you though.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
With all that you do, all of that hard work and head work
Mm-hmm.
that you do, I'm curious, what do you do to keep your soul renewed so that you can stay in the fight? What is something that you enjoy doing?
I come to Cleveland, go to the nightclub. That's what I do. I love going out and dancing in Cleveland. I do. And sometimes I want to line dance and I can't, because nobody, they don't do that here. So but I do. I like going out, I like dancing, I like hanging out with my friends. I'm real good at decompartmentalizing and really just having a good time. So yeah, I like I like going out, talking stuff to people. Just different, just letting your hair down.
So you have to,
Okay.
you need
Mm-hmm.
to call. You need to call.
I called, bother my cousin. Is she would be a good person to interview. She grew up in Shaker as well. And get her to go out with me.
That's great. This is absolutely wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. And I have to tell you, folks, we just scratched the surface. We just scratched the surface. And I really am serious. I would really to, have a conversation about a presentation that, would just be your presentation about
Mhm.
the work that you've done, because I'd
Mhm.
be really interested. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because I want to do the oral history project as well that I was talking about. So I'm gonna keep, I'm reading and I'm really trying to I want to get it to a place where I know I'm ready to go. So I am working on it though, but I'm not ready to go in the field because I don't feel like I've made enough connections yet up here. So I'm just thinking through it. Yeah.
I know it will happen. It's just a matter of time. I understand what happened. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been the evening. Thank you for taking time to be our Witness to History guest. And here we are. I'm always looking for guests on Witness to History, my telephone number and my email, or any recommendations. My neighbors, like Carmela Williams, share, with me, people that they feel may be interested and available to be guests on Witness to History. And we'll just keep on going until we just interview everybody in Moreland. All righty.
We have to get Eric. I did send him a
Yes,
message
I saw
today.
him on.
We have to get him. Oh, he was on?
Yes. Yes, he
Ah,
was.
good, good.
He's on now, but I saw his name there.
Yeah.
So he
So I
absolutely.
told him, I said, she wants to get you, Eric. You got to answer the
Yeah.
phone.
Okay, good. I'm over his ear. Very good. So he won't be surprised.
No, it's probably why he
All right, folks.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
All
everybody.
right.
I think we can mark our calendar for November 17th.
17?
No, for Witness to History next month. We need to do it on the 17th rather than 10th. We may still be focused on some things that are happening on at the moment.
Oh, okay. Because I do follow it. I think they're wonderful. I really do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We'll looking away as long as folks say yes. All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Take
Wonderful
care.
evening. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us this evening. Bye-bye.